Hey everyone, and welcome to the show, the Greg Clark Podcast, and my YouTube channel. I've got Ross Bradley here with me today. Ross, how's it going?
Great, Gret. How are you?
I'm good. So you haven't ever been on my, no, you've been on my YouTube channel before. You've just never been on my podcast.
That's right. I was on your podcast
My new
before this
podcast. Yeah,
podcast.
you've been on my old podcast. Okay, well, good. Now that we have that out of the way, today we're having a frank conversation about money. This got started because you and I had an interesting talk just a few months ago about money, and you had gotten a promotion, and you had an interesting conversation at the time. But to summarize, like what we're gonna kind of get at today is one, we're gonna simply talk about money, but then two, we're gonna talk about why it's so hard to talk about money. Why is it hard to like have frank conversations with people about money? I think it's challenging to talk about like how much you donate and whether or not you should be spending less and things like that. Like those people get uncomfortable just bringing up those topics. I'll say one thing before we go back to that text conversation, but yeah, the one thing I wanted to bring up is that like sometimes I'll release a video and I'll be like, I'm not sure if people are going to get this or if it's going to kind of like not really resonate with people.
Mm.
I know for sure that this video will not resonate with people. Like I know that some people will definitely get it, but then several people will kind of be like, why are you like why talk about money? It's like settled. There's no need to discuss it. At least that's my prediction. So okay, the reason that we're talking about this is we had a text conversation soon after you were like up for a promotion. So do you want to summarize kind of what happened and what sparked this initial conversation?
Yeah, definitely, man. I was texting. We were texting each other, and I had just mentioned that I was up for a promotion. It hasn't been official yet, but I was just saying to my friend, "Hey, just keep me in your prayers. You know, this might be coming on the pipeline soon, and I'm excited for new responsibility and a higher salary. I work as a financial analyst for an accounting organization in Durham, North Carolina, by the way. And I said, I want my standard of giving to increase, but don't need my standard of living to increase. And my friend, he encouraged me. He's one of my best friends. He said, basically, it's not bad for your standard of living to increase. And that got me thinking and got us talking. And I thought, well, yeah, that's definitely true. I totally agree. But I wasn't communicating that it was bad for your standard of living to increase. I just kind of felt a personal conviction of, I've been given so many things. I have so many things that I believe God has gifted me with and graciously given me. And so I don't need something more. I don't need to, up my standard of living and just really want to give anything on top of what I make away. And and so we were just kind of talking, you and I, Gret, about why is it hard if someone has a personal conviction to give away money. I think oftentimes we talk people out of it, and I know there are a few examples that we had texted about, but yeah, that's kind of the theme. Is it's hard for people to stay firm in their convictions to give away money when their friends talk them out of it.
Yeah, it seems like you're almost and this is like nothing against your friend or whatever. This is just like a general observation that we've made with like lots of conversations where it seems like there's this gut reaction, like there are right answers that you just say in certain situations. So if you say something like, I'm thinking about spending, like the situation you were in, you wanted to say, I'm about to get a raise, but I don't want my standard of living to increase. Someone else's gut reaction often is, it's okay for your standard of living to increase. Like we all have to agree on that because and it's just like this, and maybe not in your friend's case, but sometimes it could be like this religious dogmatism that we all have to collectively agree that it's okay to like spend money. It's okay to buy nice things. We have to all completely agree. It's okay to do these things. And, but then it becomes awkward if you're like, well, what if it's not okay? Like no one's allowed to question that. Like that's a conversation I don't hear very often. Like no one's allowed to say like if you're in a big church building, no one's allowed to say like, maybe we should spend less money on speakers and maybe we shouldn't buy comfy seats. Maybe we should use this money in a different way. And that conversation seems like it's not allowed to happen. I think that's kind of like what I wanted to get at today. I think it's important to talk about money itself and how we should be careful with it and how we should use it. And like, it's okay. Like, I feel like almost like silly saying this, but like obviously it's okay to spend money, it's okay to buy nice things, but the conversation around money seems to be somewhat like suppressed or constricted, and I just wanted to talk about that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree. And I'm kind of starting to have these conversations with some friends about the ways that we spend money individually. And, as a Christian, the way I see the church spending money. And I want to see our money go to things that are truly important, helping the poor, helping the widow, helping people in need. And I think sadly, sometimes we get very internal focused with what is a good thing. Money is not a bad thing. I don't believe it is evil. I think it's the love of money that that is evil. But yeah, Gret, you have been, doing your work with DonorSee and seeking to mobilize people to help impoverished people, materially impoverished people around the world. What do you think? There's a heart like reason or a theme that you see as to why the conversation gets, suppressed so quickly, just on a
Yeah, well,
like
I think it's
deep
like
level?
so many different things. So I don't think it's like one thing. I think part of it is people don't really realize on like a deep level how poor the rest of the world is. You tend to just like whoever are your 5 closest friends or whoever are like the 100 people that you see on a regular basis. You tend to just assume the entire world has a similar demographic makeup to those people. So like when I was growing up and I went to private school, I went to this like nice private school, lots of like predominantly white and upper class and Christian, and so and everyone had they talked a certain way and they were all familiar with some of the same things, and that was my world in high school. And then when I went, I spent a semester going to a private. I spent a semester going to a state college, and then I went to a Christian school after that. But during that state college, I was like shocked to see that people had a different, like people came from like completely different backgrounds, completely different types of culture, and still it was like predominantly white, still like relatively upper class, but it was I was so like really surprised by that, and that's just going from private school to state college. That's a small jump compared to person living in America in like a wealthy suburb to person living in a rural part of Africa that doesn't have clean water or electricity. And so I think part of it is really difficult to empathize if you just don't understand, and it's really hard to understand if you are not around poverty.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I know we've talked about. I mean, there's a quote. I don't quote him often, but Joseph Stalin. He says, the death of a million is a statistic, but that the death of one is a tragedy. And I think that plays out of if there's a face, to poverty. If you've met someone in an impoverished situation overseas, we spent time together in Malawi, Africa, and we've met, these people who have so little based on what the world says, is maybe would even define success as. But I know you found people still so grateful and so, abundantly happy. And, I worked with a microfinance organization, Hope International, and you'd visit these savings groups that we were helping to start through the local church, and they would just shower you with gifts and, give away their best vegetables and, crops and throw a party for you. Even if it was, it took 2 weeks to get all those things together, they still would just shower you with hospitality. And I really do believe that it is more blessed to give than receive. Jesus said that. And I think we miss out a lot on what joy maybe there might be. And you see this play out in even in people who wouldn't identify as Christians. Bill Gates, talks about like being, just joyful. I don't know an exact quote, but you probably know, how joyful it is to be able to give money away. And now, this man who's accumulated all this wealth and he's earned it. He's worked very hard to get to that point. I think it's written on our hearts that it is more blessed to give than receive. And I think it's sad that we stop people short of truly what is best for them and best for other people when we talk people down out of their strong convictions. And we talked about an example of Francis Chan, who's a pastor, and he was saying these book sales that I'm getting these profits I want to give away to people in need. And people from his church actually counseled him and said, well, you have to save up for an emergency fund. What about your family? What about if something happens? And he just bluntly said, is it not an emergency? The people dying, without food or clean water overseas, or in our neighborhood, in our backyard, like, is that not an emergency? What about the emergencies that already exist rather than the ones that potentially could happen? And again, you and I both wouldn't say it's unwise to save, but there has to be some sort of conversation, I guess, that goes beyond just, oh, I feel this way and you feel this way, but going deeper.
Yeah. So this is messy, and this is where, like, it's such unexplored territory that I'm doubtful of my ability to articulate if I'm going to do my best. But I think that whenever there's conversations about how people should spend money, like for the majority, like the mainstream conversation is that it puts into consideration the people who have money. Their consideration is like preeminent above the people who are poor. So like if you're talking like the conversation that you mentioned with Francis Chan, in that case, like Francis is talking about giving away money, and that's seen as like generally a good thing. But at the same time, the way that people react to it is like, what about you? Like, you're the person with money. And similar things when you think, like, I run a donation platform, but like any charity, the way that the wording is it's kind of like, you are the one who's gonna, like, you can have your name on the building. You can have this done for you. And people do, like, I think there are selfish and good reasons. Like, you can be both selfish and good at the same time when you do. I think that those things are not mutually exclusive necessarily, and like maybe even inseparable. But I think I just want to, like I said, this is messy and hard to articulate, but I think what I want to get across is this idea that the people who are poor and in need seem to be the least considered when it comes to talking about money and giving away money.
Yeah, that's true. That's really true. Yeah, it's a complicated issue, but I've found it, and I'm sure you have found it more. Just, again, those personal convictions we feel, I think immediately someone says, well, that's not true for everyone, I remember distinctly reading, and this will, resonate, I think, with all listeners, whether you're a Christian or not, but I was in a Bible study one time, and we were talking about the story of Zacchaeus. Zacchaeus was a wealthy man, a tax collector who had stolen and was very corrupt. And he met Jesus, the famous story. There's a song associated with it. I'm not going to sing it, but yeah, Zacchaeus sees Jesus, and Jesus says, Zacchaeus, I'm coming to your home. And Jesus goes into his home, and Zacchaeus seems to be overcome with the reality of this man being, more unique and wonderful and beautiful than any other person he's ever met, the Messiah that we were waiting for, that the Jewish people were waiting for. And so Zacchaeus, he says, anything I've stolen, I'll give back. I think it's fourfold. And he just has this immediate reaction of generosity that seems to be a heart touched by, the love of God. And I remember we were talking about that, and one woman very quickly, one woman said, that's a very interesting reaction. I haven't definitely ever given fourfold of, what I make, or I haven't ever had this abundance of joy in my generosity. And another woman very quickly said, well, that's okay. That's not true. Like very quickly jumped in. And that didn't sit well with me, and I could tell it didn't sit well with her. We didn't get to talk afterward, but just that idea of.
Was this like a Bible study setting?
It was, yeah. So this
is like. This is great that you bring this up. Did you want to finish anything?
No, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, this is like what you just said is so interesting, because I feel I've had the same experience where I'll be in a Bible study and I'll feel like there's lots of places we can go. Like there's like tense subjects that you can broach, like doubt. Like you can talk about doubt in the Bible study, and like people won't necessarily like it, but they'll talk about it. They'll spend time on it. But money is like the one thing within the context of a Bible study. You've got like 5 people in the room or 8 people or something. If you bring up money, let's quickly say our packaged answers and then move on to the next thing. That's like it's like the one thing where it's like really hard to discuss. Like even hell, which is like a controversial, difficult subject. you can like, people will like engage you with that. But money, it seems like there's this, I don't know, there's this visceral reaction.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It's strange. I think I could be wrong, but I thought Jesus talked more about money than any other thing. Does that sound right to you?
Yeah, I believe there was like the thing he warned people about the most. I think that's like the, like,
Right.
he warned people about stuff a lot, but like money was like either the top one or like the second to top one. Because he also said, I think it was like money and like fear not, because those were like the top two.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's very clear that,
It should be talked about. Like
right.
it's like a big danger,
Yeah,
for sure, that we
absolutely.
should, if we're going to take him at his word.
Mm-hmm.
But then it's like not talked about. Like it will be talked about on the comfort of like a Sunday morning. Like the pastor will go to the front and to have a sermon on it. But then when it comes, and that's like, okay, and that can be convicting or whatever, and you can feel like, oh yeah, he's so right, I should be more generous or whatever. But it's like, that's like, there's so little accountability with your pastor up there and this big congregation down here. But in the context of a Bible study, that's like, okay, like, are we going to really discuss if we should spend less money? Are we going to discuss if we, like, these are things that are just like pretty uncomfortable for most people.
Yeah. I think what would be really powerful, like you said, there's that lack of accountability from the stage, and just with the system or the way it's structured, it's impossible to have that one-on-one accountability or a group accountability from that setting. But how cool would it be if you're in this Bible study and you have this conviction and you just say, hey guys, I just feel really convicted about the way I'm spending my money. I'm going to go out and just look to love on some people, go buy people's groceries, go, share the love of Jesus with them. If anyone wants to come with me, they can. If anyone wants to just come watch, they can watch. If you don't, like, that would be, I think, really powerful. Paul says, imitate me as I imitate Christ. And so there's an element of, let me show you what it looks like for me to follow my convictions.
I'll be the first one to do it.
Right. And really, if you look at the life of Jesus, he never called someone to do something that he didn't do himself, laying down his own life and then calling his followers to lay down their own. And just that idea of being a cheerful giver, he was a cheerful giver. He says, for the joy set before him, he, endured the cross. And so I think that would be cool, is just, you have this conviction and you just say, all right, I'm going to do this. But I'm curious what the response to that would be.
Yeah, I know it's theoretically it's like a really great idea, but then like the actual practice of it. And I think one of the things that I think is important is that it doesn't stop. Like, it's not like a one-time, like, because Jesus talked about it so much, and because it's such an integral part of our lives, and because it permeates like so many different facets of society. I don't think it should be like this one-time conversation or this one-time, like, I'm on fire, we're going to go buy some groceries for people. It should be this like well-thought-out discussion that people have on a regular basis and that they regularly come back to, and they're constantly talking to each other about. At least as Christians, I think that should be the case.
Yeah.
And it should be the case, but it's not. And it's not like I don't know if, like, I wouldn't say I'm like a great example of this, but I think about it a lot. I don't know who to talk to about it.
Right. And that's,
I talked to you about it, but like I said, it's hard to have people to talk to about this.
Yeah. And I think you and I would admit, like, I would feel cautious saying, imitate me, because I'm imitating Christ like perfectly, or, I'm the standard. And that's
also maybe like, it's like a legitimate thing to say, like, I'm not supposed to imitate you. Like, that's a legitimate thing. Like, maybe you have like other things you want to do, or maybe you want to invest your money and make it multiply, or something. There's like lots of legitimate things that you can talk about. But to me, it's just like the discussion that needs to happen. Yeah. Just like, I can go and like be like a generous person, and I would hope that other people would want to follow. But then, like, can I, as like someone who has less money, can I, as someone who has a different amount of money than someone else, can the two of us have like a frank conversation about money? I think one of the things that's awkward, like, I'm especially thinking of the pastor at the front of the stage. A lot of times when he's talking about being a generous giver, there's like a slight incentive for him to talk about that because his church runs on the donations of his congregants. So maybe part of the problem is that, and like for me also, like I'm constantly fundraising for different things, and so, but like, and that's why I like, whenever I'm talking to people in person, I tell them what generosity is, but I don't like try and goad them into checking it out. They check it out if it's something that interests them or whatever.
Yeah.
But the point is, like, maybe part of the issue is that there's this, like, people are worried that if you're talking to someone else about money, it's going to turn into this conversation where you are responsible for giving money to them, and that's going to create like an unhealthy dynamic.
Yeah, right. I appreciate that. At a church I'm involved with, I don't attend now. I attend a plant of this church, but the Summit Church, the pastor J.D. Greer, he'll say, you know, if you hear me talking about money and you don't feel compelled to give to Summit their church, and you want to give elsewhere, that's fine. We encourage you to do that, and we're more concerned with you being obedient to the Bible that we believe Jesus has put in front of you as the best way to live, and not as concerned about, they'll say, getting the money out of your pockets, but the idols out of your hearts.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if that looks like giving to that church, then do that. But if you're not in a position to want to do that, or for whatever reason, he says, by all means, give elsewhere. But the question is not if you should give, but who you should give to, And then another thing we had kind of talked about is, I think we have this problem when we look to other people as the standard. So we look to, oh, what does this person say on money? Or what does, this famous Christian pastor say on money? Or what does, this person on Instagram do with their lives who lives overseas or whatever? Instead of, as Christians, our standard should be the Word of God, should be, the Bible, and how Jesus lived his life. And so I think we get in a problem when, instead of following the Good Shepherd, we're following just other sheep, and sheep can lead each other astray. And there aren't too many examples. I'm curious if since you're a little more in the know than I am, if you know anyone who is living a life that
an exemplary life.
Yeah, exemplary life materially, that you would say, wow, they're really living out their convictions, and I'm really impressed by that. They're giving to a point of uncomfortability.
So I do think like that giving sacrificially is like that's like the rare thing. Like there's people who give, like Bill Gates is giving away 99% of his wealth, but that still makes him extremely, like the 1% that's left over, he can still like do whatever he wants pretty much. I'm not saying I'm really grateful that Bill Gates is doing that. I'm not saying anything bad about him in that regard. I'm just saying that like it's that giving sacrificially component that is important. Like, when was the last time someone couldn't go out to, like, let's say that you're someone who goes out to eat regularly, but for a month you don't go out to eat and you take all that money and you donate it somewhere? Or when was the last time you saved up for a vacation, but you gave that, like, you just didn't go on the vacation, you gave that money away, and that was like the sacrifice that you had to make? I think I'm not sure. I know people who have donated to things that I've done, and some of them, like there's people who come from means that donate to DonorSee or Girls Shine Academy, and I'm grateful for that. And they've got people asking them for money all the time. There's a handful of people. I'm thinking of one person in particular who gave a lot and sacrificed in order to do that, to make Girls Shine Academy a reality. And that was so, it was so remarkable because it was so rare. It's like the only thing I can think of. But I think one of the things is it's hard to find someone who has who lives an exemplary life like this, because they're not, people don't tend to celebrate them. People tend to gravitate towards people who live more like lavish lifestyles, and even pop Christianity, like a lot of the figureheads like go on the stage with smoke and lights and things like that. You know what I mean? So it's like,
totally.
Yeah,
and that's another thing too, is the people who are probably living this life. Like, I'm sure there are people living in this way, but they just are not a public figure by nature of their lifestyle. So they're living in remote rural India in a slum, feeding Indian, orphans and taking care of them, but they don't have a big Instagram. They don't have a big social media following, maybe by intention, or maybe, people just aren't interested in that, sadly.
Yeah, and there's people who have like I don't want to come across like we're judging the entire like we're somehow this elevated above everyone. Like we're the only ones who have thought about this or whatever. There's
Right.
like so many people who live really sacrificial lifestyles. Maybe like remove money from the equation, and you just think about someone who's like a hospice nurse or something like that, or they work at a retirement home, and it's just like a completely thankless job that's really difficult and like
Mm.
deals with the hardest parts of life. But they go in every day with a good attitude and they make people's lives better. Like that's awesome. I think very highly of those people, and they have like patience that I don't have and so forth. But I guess it's just like this. But like what what I think would be nice is if me and you and other people could have a conversation with them about money, and also have a conversation with millionaires, and also have a conversation with people who are making minimum wage, and like if all of us could be able to together like have like a healthy dialogue of some kind where we talk about this thing that Jesus warned us about constantly. Um, I think that that'd be I think that that would be appropriate. And I think
Mm.
that the other thing is I think maybe the reason we don't talk about money is because the level of affluence that exists in our society is like so new compared to the rest of history. Like the amount of wealth that exists now that didn't exist in like the 1930s is astronomical.
Mm.
And so I think that we like maybe people just haven't learned like we have all of these people who have new money and there's not like a mature conversation about it just hasn't developed yet because it's so new.
Right. Right. Yeah. I have one comment, and then I want to help this be practical for your listeners. So I have a
Mhm.
question there. Um, just one thing to add on what you said at the beginning of your comment. We, Gret and I, would both acknowledge we are not perfect. We are far from it. We sinfully hold on to money too much and safeguard it. And just personally, I can confess, like, there's a website I use to check, like things I've invested in and stuff. And, I don't, it's maybe not a coincidence that the stock market, is not doing well. There was a big drop, and so I was looking at the certain number of, my net worth or whatever, and wanted it to be past this certain threshold. And, but why? Like, there's no reason for it. I just wanted to see a certain,
Mhm.
number hit for my own sake. And again,
Yeah.
we're not saying that getting to whatever that number is bad, but it was kind of nice right before this conversation to look and see the number, lower than it has been, like
Mhm.
3% lower or whatever. It was refreshing to know as a Christian, like, God, this is your money. I'm just stewarding what you've given me. Anything that you've given me is a gift and grace. And so if you're able to let go of it and not say it's mine and kind of white knuckle it and hold it like we wrongly often do, it's just so freeing. And so, yeah, we are far from perfect, but want to have the conversation and discussion and learn from people who maybe are much farther along than us. And then the practical question is, what ways have you seen that are effective to engage people in this, and what ways maybe have you seen they're ineffective, that like immediately it's shut down? How can we help equip people with, this might be a good question to ask, or this might be a good way to go about it, and this might be a way not to go about it?
I've had very little success engaging people, if I'm being honest. I think it's really hard. I think this like what you just talked about, where you like you wanted your investment to go above a certain line. And that was like this sense of accomplishment you feel from that. I had almost like a reverse kind of thing happen, where right before my wedding, I a little bit before my wedding, I had to go to the emergency room, and I was at the emergency room for 2 hours, and I got a bill for $3,600,
Mm,
which
how?
I didn't know that. Like I've been to the emergency room a handful of times when I was in Malawi, and there it's like super cheap and stuff, but I didn't realize it was like so expensive, and I would have maybe like not gone or something. But I felt like it was so unjust, and I was so upset about it. I was like 2 hours, $3,600 for 2 hours, like that is like so that feels like um, extortion. I was just so mad about it, and but I thought like with how much I think about money, this is like a good practical lesson for me. Like I need to like not care about this. Like I'll try and uh, I'll try and fight it or like call my insurance or something. Like I'll try and do something about it. But like I'm not saying like be a pushover, But I'm just saying, like,
Mm.
if nothing happens, I just have to be okay with that. Like, God orchestrated the event so that it would happen, and I need to be fine with that. And if I got a random $3,600 check in the mail, like, I should regard it the same way. Like,
Mm.
having money or not having money, it should be like the same. It should be the same, like, good. Like, it's both. They're both good things. They're equally good. And I think that that's like how it would be helpful if people, like, I think that's like a healthier way to appreciate or approach thinking about money. Yeah, I'm really interested to hear what people have to say about this, because I don't know how to engage people well in this. The reason I wanted to have this conversation with you is because you are like one of the, apart from like a lot of the conversations I've had with my wife, you're one of the only people. You're the only person I've like really had like a good lengthy conversation with about money, and like you're not afraid to talk about it. You don't like quickly try and push it aside. And so I think the practical thing is that we're doing this, and then hopefully more conversations spur from this. I don't know. But yeah, you can tell how optimistic I am about that.
Yeah. I'm curious to hear too from, your listeners and people who are more knowledgeable about this than us and more experienced, maybe even age-wise, have just seen more of life, who can kind of speak into this, topic. But I think about too, I mentioned Zacchaeus earlier. I think it's in Luke 19. And then in Luke 18, right before that, is the story of the rich young ruler. And, that's the man who says, like, what must I do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus says, he says, love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. Love your neighbors yourself. He says, I've done that, as if he had done that. But he's like, yeah, check. What next? And Jesus then says, sell everything you have, give it away, and come follow me. And what does the rich young ruler do? He walks away sad, because he has a lot of wealth.
He cares about it.
Yeah, right. And sadly, I don't know how to say this graciously, but I think sometimes we don't do a good job of letting people walk away, proverbially, or metaphorically, just in the sense of, if that's something you care about, to the utmost, we can't convince you, to give something away that you want to hold on to. And so we're gonna look for the people who God is, stirring in their hearts in a similar way, and be willing to let them walk away. And I don't know what that looks like, but maybe just looking for those people who, like, I'm sure you've had conversations with people where sometimes their eyes, glaze over, and 5 seconds later they're checking their, Apple Watch or something, versus people that you talk about and say, wow, that's really interesting. Tell me more about that work,
Well, I think that story of the rich young ruler is it's very exposing, because it does two things. One, I don't know if you've had this experience. I've had the experience several times where whenever that story gets brought up and Jesus tells the guy to sell everything he has, like, oh, you're a good person, well, sell everything you have. There's like a pastor or like whoever's explaining the story almost always is like, but you don't have to do that. Like, don't worry. This is not like something that Jesus is telling you to do. This is just for this guy, this situation, and like, you're in the clear. Like, don't worry. And I just think like, one, like, maybe people should walk away from everything that they have. Maybe they should, but like, I think that's like more of a surface level issue. And I think the like deeper issue here is that we should be able to walk away from everything and not be sad about it. Like, the rich young ruler is sad because he has to give up everything he has, but we should be able to just like at any point, any Christian who has any amount of wealth should be able to say, well, I'm done with it and I'm not sad about it. That should be fine.
Yes.
I think if we're understanding that story correctly.
Yeah, that's good. I knew right where you were going with that as soon as you said that, because
that's always what happens.
Yeah.
I can't have a conversation that was like, yeah.
There's a big sigh of relief you can like hear in the congregation.
Yeah, I know.
That's not for you. I don't know. And it's really interesting. I think I have found maybe asking questions is a good way, instead of, just jumping in, kind of throwing landmines or bombs, but just asking questions and hearing where people are at, which is something that Jesus often did as well, is just, asking a question to engage someone and get them thinking, and you'll be able to hear kind of what's on their heart. But
well, before we end, I want to bring up something that both you and I can relate on in regards to this, because the whole idea of, like, one of the conversations I want to have with people, but that I can't, because I feel like maybe I should have brought this up at the beginning, but the whole idea behind what makes me uncomfortable about why we don't talk about money enough is because, like, okay, so just take away me, take away you. The average American makes like $55,000 a year. The average person living in the poorest half of the world makes like $700 a year, something like that. So, and that's like after you adjust for cost of living. So us here living in America, we live in like the top 1% of the globe if you're like average. And then and you're something like 95 times wealthier than the bottom 3 billion people on the planet who are making $700 a year, and they're subsisting on like no electricity, no running water, and often like no clean water, and they like no access to basic healthcare. Like they can go down to CVS and get Tylenol if they have a headache, things like that.
Yeah.
And so these people just have like drastically different lives. And I think that there should be I guess I have a tendency to think that there should be a conversation that if we have like all this money, like so much more, like this greater wealth inequality than like a lot of the stuff we saw in the Bible, then maybe we should be open to having conversations about how we should personally use our money to help those people, and whether like should we be giving away 10%, or because we're so much wealthier should we be giving away 70% or 90% or 25%. Like I'm not making any prescriptions here, but this idea of like having so much more than other people, I think is worth talking about, and it's hard to talk about because I get the sense people don't want to talk about it because I don't think they want to hear the truth. If I'm being honest.
Yeah. No, I think that's true.
So I have to have these guys. I feel awkward just saying this like here on this live stream and people here on the podcast. It's awkward.
Yeah, I think just flipping the mentality, I guess, is just the question is often asked like, how far is too far? How much is too much? How little is too little? Whatever. How much can I afford to keep on to to hold on to? And I think, the question, instead of being how much could I afford to give, kind of like I alluded to in a little bit ago, how much can I afford to give? It should be how much could I afford to keep on, or like hold on to, keep, when I've been given so much. Why do I need these things? And again, we're trying to learn and grow and walk this out more holistically and live a life that is sacrificial. And the Bible says, if Christ didn't rise from the dead, we're of all men most to be pitied. And so people should look at our lives, and if they are a Christian, hopefully would understand why we're doing it. But if they're not, they should be able to say, you're a fool. You're throwing your money away. I don't understand how you can do that. You're living by faith. How can you do that? And I think the story of the woman with the 2 mites, the 2 coins, versus the religious leaders, the Pharisees, who give a lot more. Comparatively, this woman gives such a greater proportion of her money versus, sure, the Pharisees, they give way more a much larger sum of money, but percentage wise it doesn't make them uncomfortable. It doesn't make them lean on God and live by faith. And I don't want to look back on my life and say, wow, I could have lived by faith a lot more. I could have trusted God a lot more. He was ready to catch me and carry me and really be my father, and watch over me. But I held on to my own things and trusted them more than him. That's what I don't want. And I want your help, Gret, and I want others' help to hold me accountable to that.
Well, that's I think that was a really good summary of what we've talked about. And man, I'm really appreciative of you coming here to talk about this, because like I said, it's hard for me to find someone to talk to. I could be wrong. Maybe people will like come out and be like, no, I agree with you, I want to talk about that. Like, maybe we'll see. But I really do appreciate that. And also, just as like a disclaimer or whatever, there's a lot of people who are going to be listening to this just by nature of like what I usually talk about, who are like already really generous people and they're already like giving till it hurts and so forth. Ross, I consider you one of those people. And I'm not trying to induce, like, I really don't want to induce guilt in anyone. I really just want, I'm trying to like break through this ceiling of not being able to have frank conversations about money and open it up, especially in like Christian settings. I think that is like we have this book that we've all agreed is like something, like we've all agreed that this book is what we should be following, and this book says certain things, and maybe we should look at that. And then even if you're not a Christian, I think like the conversation about money is an interesting one. In fact, if I'm being honest, sometimes it's the people who are not Christians who are easier to talk to about money than Christians. So okay. Anyways, disclaimer: not trying to make anyone feel guilty. Ross, I'm really grateful that you would come and talk about this, and hopefully there's a way this conversation can continue, and there's other people who can talk about this. I think I don't know what that would look like, but I hope somehow it happens.
Yeah, thanks, Gret. This has been a great conversation, and hopefully more to come. I have a challenge for anyone listening to this, and the challenge is do one thing that makes you uncomfortable, with your resources, particularly money, because we're talking about money. So I understand that time, is something that also we idolize and hold on to, but because we're talking about money
or comfort.
Yeah, or comfort. We encourage you, and we're going to do this as well. Even just if it's one time, just try doing something that is out of your comfort zone, whether it's going up and, saying, hey, I'm going to buy your groceries today. You can share with them why. If you're a Christian, you can share because it's God loves them and God loves you. Or you can just do it and then say, have a great day and walk away. But we want to see see how God uses that, because I think he often rewards those who, we know he rewards those who diligently seek him, and also those who are faithful with little. He promises to set over much. And so I think when we say, all right, I don't want to, I don't feel this strong burden to do this, but I want to grow in not being as tightly holding on to money. So we're going to do that this week. It can look like something small, something big, but ask God, or just think about yourself, reflect, and say, what's one thing I can do to give money away that is sacrificial and helps me understand what it's like to live for people on the other side of the world who have so little.
I think that's a great challenge. As an encouragement to people listening to this to do the challenge, I don't think I've ever regretted doing something nice for someone else, or like I've never regretted like giving something. Like I wasn't like I've given in a way where like I wasn't able to buy something for myself because of that, or whatever. Especially when I was in Malawi, but I've never like regretted it. Like I've never been like, oh man, I wish I could have bought that thing for myself. No, it's like good that I did that. But I was gonna say one more thing, but I can't remember. So I think we'll end there. Ross, thank you so much. And oh yeah, I remember the thing. One of the other things that I think is helpful is if you do something nice for someone else, you tell like no one about it. Like not
That's
your
good.
wife, not anyone. It's like between you and them, or like maybe you can do it in a secret way. And I think that is like it's like truly like purely for the like a sacrificial thing for another person that no one will find out about. You're not getting any like brownie points or anything like that. So that was my last one. So. All right, guys, thank you for watching, and Ross, thank you for being here, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.